My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piran Nyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to cover chapter 29 of Mahan's I Got book, which is chapter, on apparitions and, demons or devils, that what, in this chapter it says. Um, we examined the state of the mind, and we know that everything starts with the mind. And whatever we see, whatever we cognize, is how the mind interprets things, and how the mind is able to be at a particular frequency. When we are a child, our level of frequency is a particular level. As we mature, as we get experience, as we learn, as we unlearn, relearn, all those things, all the interactions that we have, helps the mind to grow, or help the mind to mature, help the mind to develop. This is one hand. But if we don't do all these things, the mind also will start it'll start declining in its ability to analyze things. And sometimes we get distortion from what we see, what we experience. Things can be distorted or may not be complete or full. So this topic is very interesting because during Mahan's time, and in many disciples have come and told him, Swamiji, I see this apparition. We see various things that we can't explain this phenomena, right? So Swamiji then talks about why these things happens, given that Mahan is not just teaching meditation, but he also looks at the challenges of society, and then, like a scientist, try to rationalize it, tries to find out answers to it, why these things are happening, and how does one overcome some of the challenges that they experience, whether it's in at the mind level or whether it's in their day-to-day life. Great saints and sages played a key role in not just teaching people values, but also how to live a good life and good quality life. Somewhat like they were the counselors, they were the mentors, they were the guides, and so many of them, looked at the challenges of people and tried to find solutions. During Mahan's time, there were a lot of people that had all kinds of issues related to black magic and issues related to, mental health and so on. And Swamiji tries to provide some rationale towards why this is happening, and then in a systematic and scientific way, try to find out how do we overcome some of these challenges. So in this context, Swamiji, before we answer these questions and before we try to try to understand his perspective and then our own experience, we first need to define what it means. Apparition means many things for many people. So we really need to, like a scientist, like somebody who's following a logical understanding, we need to mean what we say and say what we mean. We really need to understand what we are talking about. So apparition, if you look at the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it says that actually it's an unusual or unexpected sight. You see things, you cognize things, you see strange things. Strange things means that you're unable to explain these things. There is no rationale for it, right? So sometimes people see that this is actually supernatural or something that is beyond their own reasoning. So sometimes people see celestial beings, angels, gurus, but sometimes they also see ghostly apparition, and so on. Apparition also means that, you see reflections of things, reflections of, objects, and appearances. You see appearances. They may be true, they may not be true. It could be an illusion, right? So apparition is essentially, things that we cognize that we have no reasoning. We have no logical, reasoning why this is happening, at least from a scientific perspective, that we are unable to explain these phenomena. But Mahan's another great saints. Even now, the psychological literature tells us why some people get it and why others don't. So in this context, you see, Swamiji speaks about why this happens, and you'll see this in page 102 and 103. I'm going to walk with you closely on this, and then I will come back. So this part is broken into three aspects. So today I'm going to talk about what Swamiji's perspective, and then the next class I'll talk about more scientific perspective, or more recent discoveries over the last 100 years on why we as a species, why some people get, visualization and so on. And then how do we harness it? And how do we, in some cases, if it's tormenting, how do we overcome that? So we'll walk through with this over the next, 3 lessons. This one will actually talk about what Swamiji spoke about from his perspective. So here, when people came to him, many of them have come, with all kinds of possessions and, trance state. Many of them have, feel that they have come in presence of various apparitions, some good, some, not so good. So they come to a Mahan to help relieve these challenges. So here, Swamiji writes that fear is the cause for the appearance of devils and apparitions. So the state of the mind, how strong the state of the mind. So he says that devils, or even the mystical words that we hear when people chant, and when we get into that fervor of some form of divine practices, we see that there are changes that happens in us. From the ordinary, we become more deeper, and there is various changes that happens in our chemical composition in our brain, and the way the brain fires, and it has an impact on the way we see the world. So, and basically what he's saying here is that as we do intensive things, our frequency changes, and in our brain, what we could not cognize, we now start cognizing. So again, but you see that, all this, he says, do not impact people with good, dependable knowledge and courage. So he says someone who's rational and logical will not be impacted by this, the notion of demons, the notion of all these celestial beings. For them, there is a logical reasoning. The mind can rationalize and understand why this is happening. Right. So sometimes, when people are not well, they see all kinds of things, and and this happens particularly when people are very sick or close to their deathbed. You see them explaining that they're seeing things around them. So here, Swamiji says that in the early days, you see, human beings, particularly, they did not get enough food and clothing and shelter and employment. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of and so one is anxiety, fear, and that kind of cripples them, and that changes the brain chemistry, and they start hallucinating. In some cases, they go for, because nobody can solve their problems, they seek the solutions from a higher order, celestial beings, and sometimes they visualize that because of the intensity. He also says that sometimes, these qualities that we visualize and so on is also based on the state of our mind, and sometimes when we carry a lot of negative and bad thoughts, that starts resonating in our mind, and it saves that in our memory. And you see that sometimes we get nightmares, and these things show up in the form of dreams and so on. So he gives an example where when someone has died, we are a social being. Whenever we interact, we store that information in our mind, in our memory, and so on. And sometimes we see that when there are good people, gurus, and great people, when they pass on, their memory lingers. And sometimes, when we're sitting for meditation, or sometimes when we're sitting quietly, we feel their presence because that's been reinforced in our mind. And sometimes people say that, hey, I saw the guru, or I saw the deity that I've been praying, so this is reinforced in the brain. The brain's frequency changes, and they start picking up these important frequencies. The same thing, when people die, and and their thoughts and their sufferings, remain in their memory, and so sometimes you see people have gone through very difficult periods, and their relatives and friends know that they have gone through a very difficult period. Sometimes, they want them to, as they pass on, have they done really well? Have they moved on to the next phase? And that sometimes they think very deeply, and some of them, when they're very close to that person, they start visualizing their presence, visualizing, in their dreams, and so on. Because of the intensity, there's a change that happens in our brain, that our frequency starts changing. And sometimes it's self-projected. Sometimes, we pick up signals from, the things around us. So the mind of people influences, others, particularly those who are weaker. If you have a very strong mind, other people's thoughts, other people's experiences will not overwhelm you or impact you. So he says that, very clearly, when such persons have died, their thoughts, their sufferings, and their deeds remain in the memory of their relatives and friends, right? When such people go to the place or very near the place where the person dies, they are reminded of them and look about with fear. So sometimes, I know people who, even though it's their close relative, they are afraid of, their appearance, or, they're afraid of the other aspects of them. While living, they've been okay, but, otherwise they are fearful of this. And sometimes you see that even a small shadow, even a small noise in the kitchen, they get frightened, and they think it's the spirit that has come to visit them. So these things happen regularly for many people, particularly those who have been so intensive in their experience, and they can't let it go. So, but he says that when enlightened people or men who have performed good deeds for the people die, and the people begin to think of them, some of the account of their love. So even those, like people like Mahans and so on, even them, when the disciple is so close, there's so much faith. Even them, they start feeling their presence of the guru. With them, the guru guiding them. There are moments that they visualize the guru, and so on, when they go to places, when they go to the guru's place, or when they go to the samadhi, or when they go to the abode where the guru is, and when they're meditating, they feel the presence, because the mind tunes on to that. So sometimes they see white images with a man, kind of a visual appearance, and when you look intensively, you see that it is like a vapor, so in the same way, you see, somebody says that the beloved pet animals we grow, like dog, cats, crow, parrots, do not turn into devils when they die. So again, it's very interesting. People are so afraid of spirits, and that they try to do all the things to overcome the spirit. And interestingly, because the mind is so focused on the spirit, that any small noise, any small things, they interpret it as that spirit. So again, here Swamiji says, neither of our pets nor people become devils after death. We are all spirit. We have a particular frequency. We take on a particular frequency in the body, and we go back to that frequency. Occasionally, somebody in the body will experience that frequency, and they will have that more transcendental frequency. At the transcendental frequency level, one who is enlightened will know that this is formless and dimensionless. One who's not, to the practice of introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation, any small experience, the mind will try to interpret and put form. And this is where we see that the whatever that is formless, when the mind cognizes it, it creates the form, and the form depends very much on what is the mold or the imprint that you have embedded. If you have a particular deity, you see the appearance of the deity. If you have a particular guru, the guru, you see the experience of the guru. If you have particular bad experiences, you'd have those experiences. So we see that sometimes, when people watch horror movies, they start imagining, all kinds of uh, creatures that were in the horror movie that shows up. So again, Swamiji talks about, this state of our mind. If our mind is pristine, if our mind is pure, if our mind is that universal, whatever energy fields that touch, it is that universal pure form that you experience. But if the mind is colored, if the mind has all the negativity, the mind, you see that when whatever forces that or energy fields that touches it, that's what it becomes, that's what manifests. Because the mold of our mind is so important, because that's what it starts shaping and creating. So here Swamiji then goes on to say that disease and devils caused by fear of the mind should be ended by the removal of fear from the mind. So to overcome this, one needs to endeavor to overcome fear. How do you overcome fear? So he says that here that men and women who lack courage, so how do you build courage? And that's something that we will cover later on how do we overcome these challenges. So he says that men and women who are lack courage, who are fickle-minded, who are chicken-hearted, right, who are torn by anxieties and worries, you see, will, possess all these qualities of seeing demons and fear and all those things that creates this apparitions. So you see that in many homes, particularly in many places, people who are poor, they go through a lot of challenges in their lives. You see that they experience many of these things. And that is why they have various, deities to guard them, guide them, gurus to help them overcome these challenges. They have shamans to help them overcome these challenges. So here he says that they look with fear and then they get greatly agitated by any small shock or sudden small noise, right? So again, once the mind is already fixated on this, any small thing will start reverberating, right? So again, he says that it's the state of the mind. So even for someone who's very strong in their personality, if the mind is weak, you see that there is this fear, and they experience many of these things that Swamiji spoke about. So he says that when the mind is weak, and when people are fearful, it impacts the body. He says that this is on page 103. He says that it causes various internal organs to start becoming less harmonious. The pancreas, the liver, because all these are tied to our endocrinal system and our hormones. When we get agitated, when we get fearful, various hormones that are not so good are released. I think I spoke about extensively on the happy hormones, which is the reverse part. So he says that all this actually, when the body is weak, when the mind is weak, you see that the mind starts projecting various things, what is formless becomes form based on the mold that we have. So again, he says that a lot of it is imagination and illusion, and one who is an enlightened person would not will transcend all these experiences. So here he goes on to say that, you see, when the body is not healthy, or when they have various financial challenges, economic challenges, there are various stress that comes in play, that has an impact on how we see the world. So, but he says that it varies according to the level of intellectual ability. If people are unable to rationalize this, they crumble, right? They really are fearful of, demons, and fearful of all the other things. But as their intellectual capacity, expands, they become more deeper. You see that, well, when people are not aware of this, when they are so fearful, sometimes it's so intensive that they hallucinate a lot. And there are times that actually they just knock out or faint because they can't cope. The mind cannot cope, and whereas as our intellect goes up, although we are going through this various stress and so on, we see that the level of impact to us it reduces. We may get a slight headache or giddiness due to the stress and so on. And we see that, okay, whereas for people who are unable to cope with it, it's much more magnified. For a Mahan or an enlightened person, they know how to manage stress very well. And you see that, it doesn't impact their mental state. Hence, they're able to glide this beautifully. And that's what he speaks about here. So basically what he's saying here is that um, all these, apparitions and all these things that we visualize is actually taking place in us, not outside us, right? And the state of our mind will determine whether it's magnified or whether it's neutralized or whether you become transcendental to it. Yes, the mind operates at a particular frequency. There are some frequencies that the mind cannot tap into, at least an ordinary mind. Occasionally, the mind reaches out or touches it for whatever reasons, the state of experiences that they're having, stress, relationship challenges, financial challenges, or good relationship with their gurus or spiritual masters or teachers. And you see that the mind's frequency was that much, slowly it expands, and the things that they could not cognize, they're starting to cognize. The problem is that the intellect is not mature enough to interpret it, right? And when it is unable to interpret it, they feel there are celestial beings, the gurus that are appearing in this form, or for that matter, on the negative part, the demons and all the other challenges, the darkness and the shadows that start showing up. But you see that why is it that Mahans are immune to this? Because as the mind is maturing, the intellect and the jnana, the wisdom, is also expanding. When that expands, whatever perturbation that is taking place in the mind is able to reconcile, the mind is able to understand, the mind is able to become aware of it, and ultimately the mind becomes transcendental. So they're not impacted by all the goodness of the visualization of the celestial being, and also the negative forces and the dark shadows and so on. So here, and sometimes, I myself personally have experienced this, where sometimes in deep meditation, you experience the presence of your gurus, your teachers, and I rationalize, why is this happening? And the first question is that the epicenter of everything starts with me. So what it means is that if my mind is so intensive on the Guru's teachings and the Guru's way of life, and you're so intensive, that Swamiji say, Utrutu Noka Noka, that intensity, your mind starts taking the form of the Guru. Your mind starts taking the form of the mentor. And you see glimpses of that guru or the mentor or the deity starts reverberating in you. And if your mind is not, if your intellect is not ready yet, it'll start visualizing. But the intellect is mature enough, the intellect is actually, we are all one. The guru, the master, everything is one. And that is why I'm experiencing this. So as what Swamiji beautifully said in some of his quotes, that ni na nane ni niu nanum nane nane, says that you and I are one. The only thing is that if the mind is not mature enough, the mind will see it separate. Even though physically I'm not there, you experience me in separation. But when the mind is one, you see that the guru, the deity, everything is core to your being, because it starts, the epicenter of that starts with you. In that same way, if your mind has all the negativity and the demonic qualities, it also starts with us. We start visualizing this. So I'm not sure how many of you all have seen this movie. Every Christmas they play this, you see, where this very mean boss that doesn't believe in the spirit of Christmas, and he always finds faults. He doesn't believe in the joy of Christmas, the spirit of Christmas, and eventually he knew that that is how he was built. And in that nice story, it shows how he starts visualizing the negativity that comes in the form of different demons that come and haunt him. And when he starts changing his ways to become kind and nice to everyone, all the demons disappear. So here it is that, when the mind matures, when the wisdom comes, we see that whatever celestial beings or whatever things all starts with us. The epicenter starts with us. And if our intellect can expand and touch this core and understand this, we see that it is actually all beginning with us. So this is what Swamiji's teachings are. And in this book, he also talks about people who are severely traumatized by this experience. How do you overcome this? And in the next class, I will go a little bit more in detail on explaining why do we get these experiences, what happens to the mind, what is it that we need to do to harmonize our mind so that we integrate both the sukhas and the dukkha's, the challenging moments and the good moments as combustion for enlightenment. This is where the experience need to transcend into enlightenment, and you see that all the deities, all the gurus, all the celestial beings, including the demons, start with us. Hence, we have the power to manage all those things, harmonize and utilize them to have a better quality of life for us and for others. So in the next two classes, I will go through this. And if we understand this, you see that you are not impacted by anything. Your mind builds courage. The mind becomes very powerful. Nothing can shake it. So this is what in this chapter that Swamiji tries to teach us. Sandosham.